This podcast was made to help you create a more culturally responsive classroom. As a first grade reading teacher, this had many wonderful ideas that can be applied to my personal circumstances, but can also be applied to a middle or high school setting as well. The first thing that you need to remember is the skills and experiences that you personally bring to your classroom. Being yourself is going to provide your students with a positive experience with their education. As educators, you also need to be aware of the situations that may arise. There are many difficulties your ESL student may be facing with culture and communication that you may be missing. These complexities may be very subtle. However, if you become aware, you will be able to recognize them. If you aren't aware, many misunderstandings will be faced between you and your student. You also need to remember to start with simple tasks and procedures. In the book Look at Me When I Talk to You, Helmer and Eddie ask, if you were new to a school, what places, routines, and regulations would you need to be aware of to function effectively? Growing up in this culture, we may assume these procedures and routines are a given, but to many ESL students, it is considered a foreign concept. They may not know the location of the gymnasium, cafeteria, bathrooms, or main office. One idea to help students struggling with this is to create a school map for them. New schools can already be confusing for students. However, this may help ease this transition. In my classroom, my students have open cubbies. It is very easy to get into each other's personal belongings. However, it is also understood that those are personal possessions and we don't get into others' property. I have never personally had problems with people taking others' stuff. However, an ESL student may be very uncomfortable with this situation. This can lead to an open discussion with all students. Some students, such as refugees, may be used to guarding their personal possessions. You cannot assume anything. Some students may also need visual demonstrations for times such as recess. They may need to have the procedures modeled to them to have an understanding of what is expected. I cannot stress enough how much you need to remember that ESL students will require a lot of patience and help. As a teacher, you need to remember they are learning a new culture and language on top of the content already being taught. They may honestly be so overwhelmed that they may not ask questions necessary to be successful. One thing in the book that Helmer and Eddie said was to consider how exhausting it must be to be totally immersed in a foreign language, expected to figure out the conventions of the new environment into which you have been unceremoniously thrust, and asked to function normally as a student. When you think about it, that is a lot to ask of any adult, let alone a young student. You need to remember to be available when you are needed. Yet it is your responsibility as a teacher to help new students understand and cope with expectations of the new school and environment. Another helpful hint to making your classroom culturally responsive is to acknowledge that adjustment issues are real and actually vary from student to student. Your acceptance of acknowledgement as a teacher may actually help ease the transition your ESL student is trying to make into the mainstream classroom. Expectations need to also be made clear. These expectations can range from punctuality with school attendance or assignment completion. One tip to help students learn time management is in the form of planners or daily agendas. It provides stability, routine, and a visual reminder for ESL students. Eventually, your ESL student will become familiar with time management and the purpose of agendas. I cannot stress enough how important it is to establish consistent routines and expectations. This is honestly beneficial for all students, not just your ESL. One last thing I want to discuss is ESL involvement in the classroom. I used to often question how to help my ESL students become more involved. Some ideas include stating clear expectations, using partner work, giving extra time to formulate oral answers with the expectation they will speak, extra time allotment for assignments, varying length and complexity of assignments. If the assessment is based on if they understand content, evaluate their comprehension, not their grammar. Use graphic organizers and other concrete materials. Know and use your students as resources. They bring a wealth of knowledge to your classroom. Distinguish between teaching and testing. Be encouraging both verbally and non-verbally, and give praise. If you take some of these considerations into account, you will find a more culturally responsive classroom in little time at all.